All right, welcome everyone. This is Open Source BI Tools in Cassandra. We're going to be focusing on doing SQL and reporting on Cassandra using these open source BI tools. A little about me. I'm an apprentice here at Anant. I've been here since around December 2019. And this is part 4 and wraps up our entire series on doing SQL and reporting on Apache Cassandra with open source tools. Part 1 was about Presto and Cassandra. Part 2 was about Spark and Cassandra. And part 3 was about open source notebooks that we can use to do SQL on Cassandra tables. And this will be part 4. And if you want to read and watch the webinars and blogs that are associated with this series, you can click on those links below when this slide deck goes up. And then you can also find the webinars themselves on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/AnantCorp. All right, and then the 3 open source tools we're going to be covering today are Metabase, and we're going to have a live demo of Metabase. We're going to cover Redash, and then we're also going to cover Apache Superset. So a little about Metabase. It's a simple and fast open source tool for BI and analytics. By simple and fast, we'll show you in the demo, but essentially you can spin up Metabase using one Docker command or using jar. There is a managed service that you can use, Metabase's cloud, and that's a paid service, but if you want to self-host, it's free and open source. A couple of the features Metabase offers: SQL mode for analysts and data pros. You can create canonical segments and metrics for your team to use. A cool thing is you can send notifications, you can send data through Slack and email through pulses. You can also check on your data in Slack via the bot, and then you can also see changes in your data with alerts. A little bit more about Metabase. A little onto the right, you can see an example dashboard of a couple of types of visualizations and metrics you can do. So you can have a map feature, you can have bar charts, line charts, and single metrics. And then these dashboards have auto refresh and can be full screen. They also have a notebook editor, and within this notebook editor, you can do visual joins and aggregations to make your filtering and dive deep into your data. And then you can also humanize your data by renaming, annotating, and hiding fields that you don't necessarily need, or you want to rename to make it more human so that people who aren't as tech savvy can use. And again, like I mentioned, we're going to be demoing Metabase at the end of this presentation. We'll go ahead and move on to the second tool, Redash. So Redash is another open source BI tool designed to help anyone of any technical level harness the data or harness the power of data. Like Metabase, they also have a paid hosting version, so you can pay and host on their servers, or you can open source and host on yourself. And if you want to do that, they provide you, like Metabase does, where they have a Docker image that you can just use. They have an AWS EC2 AMI that you can use. You can host on DigitalOcean. You can host on GCE with their image, and they also have a Docker image that you can use. In the blog that goes up in addition to this video tomorrow, I have links to everything. So a couple of features about Redash: it's browser based, so everything you're doing is within your browser, and you can share it with their shareable URL. It's pretty easy to use, and you can immediately become productive with data without needing to master complex softwares. Like some of the other more commercial tools can be a little bit more intimidating for a non-technical user. Like mentioned above, you can share and collaborate easily. You can share visualizations and associated queries and do peer review. And then also, like Metabase, you can do scheduled refreshes so that you can have automatically updated data. A little bit more about Redash. If you look on the right, we have a little GIF of a dashboard, some SQL queries that are being made, and some visualizations that are being created from that. So they have the query editor, so you can use SQL and NoSQL queries with their browser and autocomplete, which is really nice. And then with their visualizations and dashboards, you can create beautiful visualizations with drag and drop and combine everything you need within a single dashboard. They also have a REST API where you can do whatever in the UI with their API. Metabase also does have an API, and you can research more about that on your own. It provides broad support for data sources. And again, they have an extensible API for native support for a bunch of different data stores, warehouses, and SQL NoSQL stores. And they also do alerts, as mentioned before, and you can either be defined if something happens, like you have condition sets of a number drops below a certain number, get notified so you can figure something out. So that's the whole concept of BI tools, is you can make data-driven decisions, and then also you can be alerted instantly when your data changes. And we're going to move on to the third tool, which is Apache Superset. This is pretty cool. I didn't know much about this until I looked it up. So Apache Superset, it's an open source BI tool for data visualization and data exploration. It's easy, code-free, and their user flows allow you to drill down and slice through your data and apply it to dashboards. And you can use these dashboards and charts for deeper analysis. And they have a state-of-the-art SQL editor / IDE that you can easily create workflows and visualizations out of any data you're using. And they have a pretty good security model. So depending on how you want to give access to users, so if you're using this BI tool for your clients, you can hide certain dashboards behind certain kind of authentication walls and have everything segmented as needed. A little bit more about Superset. To the right, we have an example dashboard of the different kinds of visualizations you can do and all the things and all the metrics you can kind of play with. And then they have an intuitive interface to explore and visualize your data sets. And then from that, you can create your dashboards. And then if you want to take a better look at their all the different kinds of visualizations they have a couple of really cool 3D ones. If you check out their GitHub, but the links will also be in the blog that goes up. And they have fast loading dashboards, and you can trigger refreshes. They have a lightweight semantic layer, allowing to control how data sources are exposed to the user by defining dimensions and metrics. And then they also have out-of-box support for most SQL-speaking databases. So if you can't necessarily connect to Cassandra, you can use something like Presto, which we'll be doing when we're connecting with Metabase. So before we move on to the demo, I'll see if anyone has any questions. You can go and ask them as needed in the chat. All right, doesn't look like any questions. So the demo, we're going to be using DSE for Cassandra and DataStax Studio for Notebook. If you've been to parts 1, 2, and 3 of this series, you'll be familiar with this notebook, but essentially we're just using this to insert CQL. So that way we don't have to manually do it in CQLSH, because Notebook makes it easy, because we're going to be inserting like 1,000 rows, and you can just copy and paste all the same data and try it on your own. And I'll show you how to do so in DataStax Studio. If you don't want to use DataStax Studio, you can still download this notebook file and open it up. There's a code.txt file once extracted, and that has essentially all the CQL commands and queries that we'll be using. And then again, like I mentioned, we're going to be covering Metabase because it's the easiest and fastest to spin up, and I want to respect everyone's time. And then we're also going to be using Presto, because Presto is what's going to allow us to connect to Cassandra. All right, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so like I mentioned, Metabase, you can quickly get started using a Docker command, or you can use jar. We're just going to go ahead and copy and paste this Docker image. Let's make sure Docker is running, and it is. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste, and that should get my Metabase. There we go. All right. So I'm just going to close that for now. So that's already good and going. So if you're downloading it for the first time, it might take a little bit longer, but it's pretty simple. So like I mentioned, the DataStax Studio notebook that we'll be using, the link will be in the description when this YouTube video goes up. So we're just going to go ahead and download it. All right. And then we're going to go to our terminal. So it's going to open a new tab. I'm going to go ahead and get my Cassandra started. So I'm just going to cd into DataStax Enterprise bin. All right. And then while that runs, just make sure it gets going. There we go. And then we're going to cd out of DSC, and then we're going to cd into our Presto server. And if you're not familiar with Presto, again, like I mentioned, you can go back and watch part 1 of this webinar, Presto and Cassandra. It is available on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/AnantCorp, or the blog. You can go to blog.anant.us and you can search for Presto and Cassandra, but the link will also be in the description if you want to read about it. And then that also includes a demo of how to get set up and test Presto and Cassandra. So we're going to go ahead and start. On my OS, I'll need to sudo to start it. I mentioned that in the webinar if you watch it in the future, or if you have, or if you were there when we did it. So to launch Presto, there's 2 modes we can run it in. We can run with launcher start and launcher run. So launcher start is no logs and launcher run is with logs. Just for sanity's sake, we're just going to keep it with start with no logs. So bin launcher start. All right, there we go. Let's see, our Presto server started. So now if we go to Cassandra, our Cassandra is running. So we'll go ahead and start our DSE studio, sorry, a DataStax Studio server. That's going to be a bin server sh. And while that goes, we'll go ahead and actually we just got to wait for that to go. So DataStax Studio is going to run at localhost 9091, and that's going to be the UI that we're going to be using just to import our data in. But then we're going to be using localhost 3000 for actually using Metabase and showing you how you can access your Cassandra data through something like Presto. All right, so this is our DataStax Studio. So like I mentioned, everything, all the CQL commands that we'll be using are within this notebook file that we downloaded. And all you need to do is drag and drop. That's the nice thing about it. It's easy. This has all the commands already written out for you, right? So it's just to make your life a little bit easier. So we're going to go ahead and create our key space with this first command. So it's going to create a demo key space, which is a simple strategy and replication factor of 1. And we're going to go ahead and run that. Success. Cool. So now we are going to select our key space demo. We're going to create a table that's going to have spacecrafts with their journey ID and the summary start end time. And we're going to be able to visualize this kind of data using the BI tool. So essentially, we're going to create this table. It's going to say success. And then we're going to insert 1,000 rows. Like I mentioned before, we're using DataStax Studio just because we're inserting 1,000 rows. If you want to insert 1,000 rows using CQLSH, go ahead, but this just makes it easier. You can copy and paste into your terminal, whatever you need to do, but this is just easier for me. All right, so we're going to select our key spaces demo again, and we're just going to run this, and we should see a success in a second. There we go. And then we're just going to run a CQL command. It looks kind of similar to SQL because it is pretty similar to SQL, but this is just going to confirm that our data was inserted into the first table, and it was. So now we're going to create a second table, which is going to be spacecraft speed over time. Just a forewarning, if you're using this data set as like anything outside of a learning example, this data model is just something I quickly threw together. It's not anything that should be used in any production, any actual outside of training experience. This is just to learn how to use Presto, to learn how to use Cassandra, to learn how to use Metabase. So for the second table, like I mentioned, it's going to be spacecraft speed over time, and there's going to be a journey ID. That's the same one associated in the first table, and then the spacecraft name also from the first table. And then this table is going to have much less records. If you were here in the other videos or in the other webinars, you'll understand why we were doing this. It's to essentially do our join statement at the end that we can't do in SQL natively. That's why we use something like Presto. That's why we use something like Spark to do SQL on it. So we're going to go ahead and create the second table. Success. So we're going to go ahead and select key space for the seeding for the second table, and we're going to go ahead and run that and success. And now we're just going to confirm that our data was in the second table, and we're going to hit run. And it is great, 18 results that matches up. So like I mentioned, if we try running a join statement, so say if we have a scenario where we wanted to get data that was spacecraft, and we wanted to get the spacecraft from the first table, the summary of that spacecraft journey from the first table, because remember the first table is spacecraft journey catalog. So if we wanted to get the spacecraft and their journey, but speed is not included in that first table. Speed is included in the second table. So if we wanted to run a join statement that got the speed of the aircraft and the associated summary of that journey, we can't do that natively with CQL because we can't run a join statement. But with something like a SQL query engine, like Presto or Spark SQL, in parts 1 and 2 of this series, we showed you how to do that. But essentially, we're just going to go ahead and just try it. We know it's going to fail, right? There's no input for inner join. So now that we have our data within our Cassandra key space demo, we're going to go ahead and get started with Metabase. So let's go to localhost 3000. Go ahead and close this. So just a little admin stuff. It's just going to ask for language. Email, password. All right, so now this is where we add Presto. Like I said, Metabase is very simple and fast to get started. So we're going to select Presto as our data source. Presto. So we're going to name it demo. I'm going to do lowercase. And then, so this host thing for Mac, when you're using Docker, sometimes if you were here in part 3 of the series where we covered open source notebooks in Cassandra, we covered a notebook called Quix, Q-U-I-X. And to connect to that and to connect to our Presto server that we used with that, we had to use host Docker internal versus using localhost. And that's something, depending on your OS, you might have to play with. For Mac, host.docker.internal is what you want to use. So our database is Cassandra, and username, password. All right, and then we're just going to go ahead and hit next. And it should work. There we go. So our data is connected. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. I don't want to get subscribed to any mailing list right now. Take me to Metabase. And that's it. We have a working BI tool. So now, if I want to look at my data, browse data. If we look in our demo, we have our demo key space, right? That we created in this notebook. So if we click on it, we'll see our 2 tables. If we click on the first table, we'll see our 1,000 records. And then we can hit filter if we want to find certain stuff. We can summarize it, which is pretty cool. And then you can see it, an editor. So basically this shows you how the data is being segmented. And then you can view the SQL that's being used. So like saying select everything from demo, from the table spacecraft journey catalog. So let me go back to demo here. So just off the cuff, if you want to look at a visualization of your table, you can just hit this visualization tab at the bottom. And because we don't have any speed numbers here, it probably won't be something we can use right away. But I'll show you something cool in a second. But if we look at spacecraft speed over time, again, same thing. We can see our data in the table. So we have a lot more different options for visualizations, right? Because we have this speed table or this speed column, right? So if we look at this and say a line, but actually line's probably not the best option. Let's do bar chart. So in our x-axis, we're going to select, let's do spacecraft name, and on the y-axis, we'll take the speed. So we can see that the speed of this spacecraft was 30,000 kilometers per hour. This one was 30,000. This one was 30,000. So essentially, you can do one-click visualization, well, a little bit more than one click, but very simple visualization straight from your data, just in this data visualization section. Now, something Metabase does that's pretty cool is that they can automatically create a dashboard for you. So what I'm going to do is I selected my schema of demo, key space demo, but I'm going to visualize spacecraft journey catalog. So it created metrics for me. You can again edit this if you need it, but look, it shows you 1,000 total events. So there's 1,000 total records, events over time. So there were 4 items that started in 1961. There were 9 that started in 1969. There were 7 that started in 2000. So really cool stuff like this, depending on your data, can easily right away through Metabase make differences in your business, making data-driven decisions. And so we can edit different kinds of data. If you want to drill down, you can just click on the item and you can zoom in. So you can see a more congealed quarter-based analysis. So like say these happened in Q1, so January to March. These happened in Q2, March to July, or yeah, but you get the idea. So say if I go back, oh, nope, I want to go home. And if I want to drill down on the data specifically, so if I click on a bullet, so there were 6 items associated with a start time at 1980. So if I click on view these, you can see the exact records that are associated with that. So depending on what kind of data you're looking at, obviously this data is not the best for this, but depending on the data that you're using, this could be super helpful with the drill down click. So let me go back. So let's look at spacecraft speed over time. So these numbers are going to be a little bit different, right? Because there's the speed value associated with these trips. So let's look at spacecraft speed over time. So we can edit these visualizations. So if we want to look at this in a scatter plot, we can, but let's look at it in the bar chart. So there were 4 spacecrafts that went at a speed of 30 to 30, 10, or 30,000, 30,000, 10. There were 2 spacecrafts that went from 30,000, 20, 30,000, 30. So again, if you want to, depending on what your data is, these numbers and these charts that were automatically generated for you can be super helpful. And then if I go into the write SQL, so the SQL terminal, I'm going to go ahead and select my demo key space. So I'm in my demo key space. A word of advice, I guess, when you're using Metabase's SQL editor, you'll need to say whatever you named your key space as. So like if I'm trying to access data from spacecraft journey catalog, also autocomplete, very, very, very helpful. I'll need to preface this by demo, right? So that it knows where to exactly extract it. So say if I want to run this join statement, that we could not run in SQ or in CQL will be able to run in SQL. So essentially, I'll just have to append demo in front of all these table names. And it should give us the join statement that we were able to get working in webinars 1, 2, and 3. So let's hit run query. Let's see. There we go. So we got the spacecraft name, we got the summary associated with that spacecraft's journey from the first table, and then we got the speed of that journey from the second table. So if we want to visualize this, let's put it on a scatter plot. Let's say x-axis is summary, y-axis is speed. Actually, that's not what I want to do. Spacecraft name. There we go. So for STS-37, we have 2 clock speeds. For Gemini 7, we have 2 clock speeds. So for each one, like I mentioned about the data model, this is something I threw together. So I know everything has 2 speeds. But yeah, you can quickly visualize this. There is a that I'm trying to do. Let's do a bar chart. Let's do x-axis. I want the summary. Actually, it might be in the demo one. I saw it. It looked really good. Okay, it's not showing me. That's by a category. Where is it? So essentially what they did was, let's see if I can create this visualization. Let's go here. Okay, no. So let's go to browse data, create a visualization. Dang it. There's something really cool I wanted to show that it automatically generated for me. So what happened was it automatically made a bar chart where it took the summaries and it showed you how many trips were made per summary. So actually, let's see if I'll be able to if I can play with this to get it to work. Okay, there we go. So this isn't the visualization of it, but actually, wait, let's see if I can do it. Okay, yeah, there we go. Got it to work. All right, sorry about that. But yeah, so let's say here, there were 14 that don't have specific summaries. Yeah, so there's 14 items that don't have specific summaries. So let's go back. And let's look at more of this drill down. So there were 41 trips that were to bring passengers to the moon. There were 62 trips to bring supplies to the Space Center. There were 70 trips for crew rotation. So let's look at the drill down here. So there were 44 for ISS, the International Space Station crew rotation. So if I want to look more about this data, we can see that the summary is the same for all of them. And then say, depending on our data, we want to see what changed every time this journey happened. So if we're running a more complex query where we're including speed or some kind of duration of the end time, start time, for every trip that has a summary of ISS crew rotation, what was the difference in end time, start time. So take that difference and then put that on a plot. So essentially we would have a BI analysis of the trip duration for every trip that was for ISS crew rotation. So we can see, say if one trip had a long duration span, why did that take long? Versus if that was an outlier versus every single other one, which was kind of average. So say if like something took a week, obviously it would take probably much longer, but probably over time it's sped up, but I don't want to get construed from the point. Yeah, so say if we have an outlier that took exponentially longer for the entire duration of the trip that has a summary of ISS crew rotation, we can ask questions why. Because we have that data plotted, we can see that there's an average that this outlier is not a part of. So why did that happen? Then you can make data-driven analysis, and then you can figure out what went wrong. They ran out of gas. They got stuck in space, right? So yeah, so this is cool things you can do with your data using Cassandra data, using something like Presto, which is also open source, and then using something like Metabase to make these data-driven decisions. So that will wrap up the demo for now, and then we'll bring it back to the presentation. Thank you for joining us. I hope you were able to take something away today. If you want to reach out to us here at Anant, you can email us at solutions@anant.us, or you can visit our site and fill out our contact us form. And I will open up the floor to questions. You can write them in the chat, and I'll see if I can answer them. All right, looks like there's no questions. Again, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out to this series finale of doing SQL and reporting on Apache Cassandra with open source tools. Within this series, we covered Presto, we covered Spark, we covered a few different open source notebooks, things like Jupyter, Quix, Polynote. And then in this final series where we covered open source BI tools, we covered Metabase, we covered Redash, and we covered Apache Superset. So again, I hope you were able to take something away from this series. If you weren't able, or if you missed parts 1 through 3, they are and will be linked in the YouTube description when this video goes up. And you can also watch the webinars that are associated with parts 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is this part right here. You can go to youtube.com/AnantCorp. And you can also go to blog.anant.us to read the written accompanied blogs that go hand in hand with these 4 webinars. Thank you.